Namaste. It's so wonderful to be here to share some yoga together. And today we're going to look at something. We've used this book in the past. It's called God is a Verb, and it's about Jewish mysticism, written by the Rabbi David Cooper. And he just shares so beautifully. And at the beginning of the book, he talks a little about the fact that for a long, long time, the great wisdom of the world has been available to us. And, for a couple of centuries now, it's been available in the written form so that people could read it. They could go to the great libraries. I mean, now we're in a position is if you want to read about the great teachings, you can order a book and it'll be on your doorstep tomorrow morning. And so we have incredible access to the wisdom of the ages. And he says, so one of the things that's interesting to him is that in all that time, there isn't a huge change. There's some change in consciousness, but there's not a huge change in consciousness. The human race hasn't grasped those wonderful teachings and made them their own. And so he says it's really an interesting thing. He said that in that time, there have been many great teachers that have shared the wisdom that they have learnt over their journey. He said, but the interesting thing to him is though there are many great teachers, not so many great students. So I thought that was something for us to consider today is, are we a good student? Are we a good student of yoga, of spirituality? And he was talking about how, it's not hearing about these things. It's not even studying them. There are people who get PhDs in comparative religions. There are people who study religion all their life. But even within that, even though they spend time studying it, so many of us don't assimilate it. We don't integrate it into our being, and we don't integrate it into our lives. And so that's really what we want to focus on is how are we going to integrate the great wisdom that we know how to access? How are we going to make that a part of our consciousness? So Rabbi Cooper summed up Jewish mysticism in these three plus words. He said, you can sum it up as awaken, enlighten, transform. Transform from darkness into light. And so really, and I don't think yogis would have any great argument with that. This idea of awakening, of shifting from being a human being intent on survival to being a spiritual being, to awaken to that change in reality, to eventually become enlightened. And any enlightening experience, allow it to transform you. So very often we as devotees on the path, we've been awakened or we wouldn't be here. And very often we've had enlightening experience. Sometimes it's in listening to someone talking, sharing the scriptures, reading, or in your own meditation. But are we transforming? Are we changing and growing? And he says, just for any one of us, for anybody, if you go to a beautiful garden, you can enjoy it at different levels. You can go and be struck by the beauty of it, of the colors and the many different plants, of the aroma, the scent of the flowers and the grasses and the different plants. You can be aware of the work that's gone into it, for planting it and tending it, watering it, planning it. And you can love the beauty of it, or you can love the consciousness that went into creating the beauty of this garden. England has wonderful gardens. There are people who designed them become famous because they bring such beauty into people's life. But he says that, and you might like just the tenderness of the fragile plants, the calmness, the busyness, the vitality of the garden. He said, but there's an experience beyond that. So that's something we can all experience. But a more mystical experience it's deeper. And he said, so in your garden, you might find that you're connecting with the essence of each plant. Any other living beings in the garden, the interaction. He even talks about the hovering angels. A mystic sees, or contemplates at least, that spark of the divine, of holiness that resides within everything, and sees this garden as a reflection of the whole cosmos at play. So the garden becomes a vision of the divine play. So are we transforming? Do you just run around the garden and not notice any of it? Do you see the beauty of it? Do you see the work that went into it? Or do you sense the divine at play? Can we practice that? Are we transforming our consciousness in that beautiful way? And he says, there are two views of Jewish mysticism. And I think that it's interesting that yogis would definitely say the same kind of thing here, that mystical teachings cannot be learned from books, that rather they're transmitted from teacher to student. And, that's true. If you're learning things, that's true in so many ways, of so many things that you learn. But it's particularly true in terms of the spiritual path. So he says, so you have this transmission from teacher to student. And he said that each person, and Ramakrishna used to say this, that each one of us is entitled to have a direct experience of God. So that when you sit on your mat, that you have the right to enter a state of higher consciousness and receive your insight directly. Anything less is just, just ever so slightly short of the mark. We want it to be something that is this personal, individual soul relating to the great soul. So, you may have a teacher who helps you to have these experiences, or you may experience them personally. But even if it's a direct experience, this rabbi says, a flesh and blood teacher can greatly accelerate a student's progress. But remember that the ultimate teacher is the source of life. You don't have to, somebody else doesn't have to do this for you. When you're brought up, I was brought up in the Catholic tradition, and very often it was this sense that the priests knew God, they were going to tell you what God wanted, and you were going to do what they said. And there wasn't this sense of having a personal relationship, which never quite made sense to me. So having the idea that you could have a personal relationship with God was such relief. but also the recognition that the great souls can, like Guruji would talk about it, he says it's almost like being a matchmaker. He introduces the devotee to the Lord of their heart and then stands back. So it's so beautiful. And so how do we learn, how do we transform? How do we learn how to live? And he says, in Jewish mysticism, it's not a systematic approach. It isn't a, learn to do this and learn to do that and learn to do that. He says it's much more of an outlook, a perception of reality founded on mystical conceptions of life, of death, of creation and the creator. And I think that that's something that we work on all the time, is our perception of reality. That's where transformation happens. When you no longer perceive the outside world as real, but that you have this mystical conception of life, of death, of creation, and the creator. So many times we put our faith in the external world. And even though we have heard these great truths, we don't live our life based on those truths. We live our life, we live our life based on our perception of the external world. So you can see why it's so important to transform, to shift, and to live from a different view of life. And he says one of the best ways to find out more about this personally for yourself is to ask yourself the question, what is your most precious gift? What is the one thing that you have that if it was taken away, you would never be the same again? So I thought we'd take a little while and work with this. Have a look in there. In that stillness, can you sense what is your most precious gift? Try. So I don't know what you found when you looked in there. You know, is it a particular relationship that you have? Is it your health or the health of your loved ones? Was it something completely different? So Rabbi Cooper suggests that our most precious gift is our awareness. And that really this awaken, enlighten, transform is this opening of that awareness. You know, he says something is only precious to us if we're aware of its value, if we have that awareness. And he said, you know, that when you look, and I've had this experience having been out in Africa, where the deer, the different types of deer, they eat the grass, and then all of a sudden they raise their heads and they stand stock still and they listen and they smell and they watch. They bring all of their consciousness to that moment. You know, they're really looking for, they're acutely aware of any danger that might be there. And this is something that's shared by so much of the animal kingdom. They have this fine-tuned awareness. And yet our potential for higher awareness exceeds all of theirs. It's quite something to think about, isn't it? That our potential for being fully present in the moment exceeds theirs. And you know, when you look, if you watch nature programs, you look and you see, you know, I happened to watch one this week and they had a cheetah that was stalking. And again, talk about focus and alertness and intent. Soft and gentle movements, completely aware of the moment. So how good are we at being aware of this moment? Because this moment may start as being one of discomfort, it may start as being one of boredom, one of fear, one of tiredness. Who knows how we feel? It might be one of joy. But what happens when you bring your awareness to bear in this moment? So the rabbi said, we need to take the reins of our mind in hand. Our mind is not the enemy. Really, if anything, it's our lack of awareness, our lack of willingness to be in the moment. So realizing the mind is not the enemy, take the reins of your mind in your own hands. Take control of your mind. Easier said than done. But just the effort to do it, just the effort to do it is transforming. And it's amazing what happens if you stop the current run of your thoughts and feelings and bring it back to now, to this very moment. He says, let your awareness of everything you consider precious and sacred in life grow. Let your awareness of everything you consider precious and sacred in life grow. Why is it that we spend our time and effort putting our awareness into the things we don't want? When we've all experienced that which is precious and that which is sacred. But no, we let our mind dwell on that which is fearful, that which is defeatist and bored, whatever it is, that part of us that's too busy. There's no busyness in the now. And so let's take a moment and consider, and well, actually, I'm going to finish this and then we'll go back and do that. And he shares something from one of the rabbis that he quotes in this book. And he said, for each one of us on the path, we're trying to figure out how to bring these beautiful truths into our life in a way that's tangible, in a way that is transforming. And so this rabbi, I don't know how you say it, but it looks like Shlomo. He says, the world is balanced. The world is balanced to help one another. The balance of the world depends on us being able to be one, to help one another. And as he really worked to integrate spirit into his own life, these were the simple things that people noticed about him. Just very, very simple. He would stop and talk to anyone in need. So here you have this awaken, enlighten. But what does it look like when you are transformed? Well, it might look as simple as you becoming a person who stops and talks to someone who's in need. And the other one, he treated each person as if he or she was a saint. How different would life be? If you treat somebody as if they are good and kind and honorable, you bless them and you bless you. When my children were little, the primary school that they went to, the school nurse there, her husband, had taught politics at USC. He was a retired professor and a wonderful man, Professor Friedman. Anyway, he was talking to his wife and he said, I don't like being retired. I'd like to be doing something. And she says, well, come to my school. She said, the children need help with reading. And so this man came and he showed up at school every day and he always wore a suit. He was very dapper and he always had a smile on his face. And so he would come and he would read to the classes, or he would help each individual children with their reading. And he was such a gentleman. He knew the names of every student over time. And he would call them by their name. And he would call them Master so-and-so or Miss so-and-so, using their last name. And he was all unfailingly polite and supportive of them. And I went to a parent-teachers night one night, and this young boy came in with his parents, and his parents were having a rough time. You could tell they were looking very, very downtrodden, and life was not going well for them at that moment. And he went over to them and he said, oh my goodness, you must be Mr. Sanchez's parents. He says, what an honor to meet you. Your son is a credit to you. Treating each person as if they were a saint. What a waste to use our awareness on anything less. So let's take this last 5 minutes and not look at, just sit for 5 minutes And let your awareness of everything that you consider precious and sacred in life, let it grow, and recognize your personal connection to the divine. Om Beloved Lord, by your grace, may we be transformed. Sensing the wisdom of the soul being integrated in the whole of your being and moving out to express in the world. Namaste. Have a wonderful week.